Everyone. So I know I'm really late to ranking this franchise because Friday the 13th was like a week ago. However, by the time it was Friday the 13th, I already watched like 9 movies. I thought at this point, with the amount of time I have wasted trying to make a video about this, I should get this out anyways. Now, I should warn you that if you are a diehard fan of this franchise, you're not going to like what I have to say about a lot of these movies because I didn't like most of them. Now, while that's not a surprise to me or to most people, I thought I should say that before starting this video, just for the people who don't want to see opinions that differ from theirs. I hoped everyone was exaggerating about the whole Jason being on a boat until the last 10 minutes criticism that you hear whenever someone talks about this movie, but nope, they are absolutely right. While it would be a cool concept, it's somewhat of a portrayal to the little consistency this franchise had before this, because Jason just wants people to leave him alone and avenge his mother. So him just going on a boat to mindlessly kill people already doesn't make sense, but if you were going to have a Jason movie not in Camp Crystal Lake, why have it on a boat of all places? At this point, another rehash movie would have been more enjoyable because this is so boring. Now, a lot of horror movies work really well in a confined space. However, most of these movies are not very tension-filled and feel more like a B-movie, and this one is no exception, so it just feels boring. It's just not even worth talking about, and even when we do get to Manhattan, it's not that entertaining. Everyone talks about the punch and kill, but that's the somewhat entertaining thing that holds this movie from not being an absolute dumpster fire, but even then, it's not like it saves it or anything. It is genuinely a terrible movie, and while not easily the worst, definitely the most boring. But the more I think about it, it is the worst. It really is the worst. This movie may not have been as boring as Jason Takes Manhattan, but is still incredibly boring nonetheless. The acting was awful. I don't think there's been a worse cast in this entire franchise than this one, and considering it is a Friday the 13th movie, and this franchise has had some terrible actors, that's saying a lot. They spend so much time with these characters, and you just don't care about any of them because they can't act at all. Now, while this is expected in a Friday the 13th movie, on top of that, the MPAA hacked this movie to death to the point where it's not even fun to watch anymore. It's just a boring supernatural slasher without any entertainment or substance to make it watchable. The only reason I have this one over the other one is because it had somewhat of a different concept that isn't in any other movie in here, but also it's just a rip-off Carrie White, so even then I can't give it too much praise. Overall, it's just a terrible movie. Now, this movie is probably technically worse than What's Beneath It. It's the first movie shot completely digital, and it absolutely shows because the special effects are awful in this movie. The acting is bad, and the dialogue is even worse, and the story is non-existent. However, this movie is somewhat enjoyable for how absolutely stupid it is. Now, I don't enjoy this movie as much as other guilty pleasures. It still can be somewhat boring. However, compared to the 2 movies below it, it's like watching an Avengers movie. Now, people are going to get mad at me because this is an iconic movie and people praise it for that. However, when it really comes down to it, even with the legacy it made, it's an incredibly cheaply made, bland, boring movie with atrocious acting. It's hard to hate this movie so much because at the end of the day, it's just generic. The kids just do random things most of the movie, and it's bad because we spend so much time with these people and we know nothing about them because there's nothing to know about them because they're all so boring. The only kind of unique thing about it is instead of knowing who the killer is, it's a whodunit, and that the horror icon of this franchise isn't the killer, but it's not even a good whodunit because Pamela isn't brought up until she's revealed at the end, so it just brings no emotion or any shock value out of you of who it is ends up being. The only good thing about this movie is Pamela Voorhees' performance, though. It's actually really good even if it's kind of cheesy, and her motivation is still interesting though, and builds up with the entire franchise, and you actually feel kind of bad for her. However, 20 minutes of a movie can save for the first hour from being completely boring. A New Beginning is just forgettable because after part 4, they obviously didn't want the end of the franchise. They had to find another way to bring him back, so I guess they decided to have someone else as Jason. This is the movie I remember by far the least about it, so it makes it not look as bad as the last few movies. However, if anything, this might be more of an insult because this movie is so forgettable. The only standout thing about this movie is that Jason is not the killer, and that's it. There is nothing to come back here for. Now, while this movie doesn't have a crazy ton going for it, I actually kind of enjoyed this. The characters were pretty fun, whether it's the teenagers or the biker gang, they're all pretty fun, and this movie has a pretty good Jason in it as well. However, it just doesn't stick out as much as some of the other ones. This one really feels a lot like a rehash because not a ton that's interesting happens or a lot sticks out besides Jason getting his hockey mask. Also, watching this movie at a TV screen just doesn't do it justice because this movie was pirating off of the 3D gimmick back a while ago. It's not terrible, but it definitely feels annoying at times when you're seeing a stick frozen on the screen for about 10 seconds. However, it's still better than a good amount of the movies in this franchise, and being a 6 out of 10 in this franchise in a normal franchise is at least being like a 7 or an 8 out of 10. Now, Freddy vs. Jason isn't a movie I expected to be good at all. In fact, what I got was pretty much what I expected. The characters are horrible in this movie. They are so bad and poor and lazily written, like in a lot of slasher movies. The story is stupid, dumb, it doesn't make sense like a lot of slasher movies. However, when we get to see Jason and Freddy actually fight, it's really entertaining. And even when they're not fighting, it still can be a pretty entertaining movie overall. This is very much so a guilty pleasure movie with really no value to it whatsoever. And yeah, that's why it's up here so high. It's fun. I didn't expect a good movie out of this. And what I got was at least entertaining. Would I ever watch this again? Probably not, but I had fun when I was watching it. Now, every movie from here on up is at least decent in my opinion. Jason Lives has probably my favorite opening in any of these movies, where it's Frankenstein themed but also has this kind of campy Friday the 13th aesthetic to it that just starts off the movie really well. I also enjoyed the characters well enough. Tommy and Megan are a fun duo with some pretty solid chemistry, and it's also just an entertaining movie with Jason killing people. It had some unique things about it and some good characters, but it's nothing to go crazy over. Now, I know a lot of fans of this franchise really dislike it for the changes it makes for the stuff that is completely different from this franchise. However, to me, I don't mind it. This movie doesn't really affect Jason's core motivations, and while it seems very out there, at the same time, Part 6 had Jason come back to life by getting struck by lightning. It's not like these movies never have any dumb supernatural stuff happening. I think the concept is a really cool idea, and they take it to full lengths, making this movie very entertaining and rewatchable. It's a nice change of pace, and they use it very creatively. The characters aren't just enjoyable in this movie to me. The acting is actually pretty decent from them, in my opinion, which is very rare for these movies. Now, while I do find this movie very entertaining, I don't really see it that much as so bad it's good. Sure, it's not a perfect movie, it has flaws and inconsistencies, but I see it as such a crazy movie that it's really fun. Now, you know how I said the first movie was just boring, generic, with little to offer? Well, this movie had a lot of what the original had and just made it good. I really like the characters in this movie. They're not the best actors, but they're not terrible. I like Paul, I like Judy, because they have actual personality traits. They are more like teenagers and individuals, more than just fodder you're waiting to see killed. I really like the final girl, Alice. She's smart, but also not a machine-gunning badass. She's just a normal person. They also somewhat humanize Jason in this movie and make you feel bad for him at times. Like when Alice talks about him, or that scene where she's pretending to be his mother, it makes you somewhat understand his character more as someone who never really had any love and affection by anyone but his mother, and causing him to go down this path of revenge when she died. Now, maybe it's not as deep as I explained it, but it's pretty well done. The jump scare in the end also is really good compared to the other ones, because you think absolutely nothing can happen, she's safe, there's no way Jason could just come out of nowhere and boom, he just jumps through the window. Now, while I like a lot about this movie, at the end of the day, there's still some bad acting, some bad dialogue like you'd expect from a Friday the 13th movie. I also don't like Sackhead Jason. First off, he's just not intimidating at all, and the fact that he only has one eye just makes him look stupider. He just doesn't really look or feel intimidating most of the time, and it's just this performance is not that good. However, with all that being said, still a pretty good movie. If you're a Friday the 13th fan and you hate this movie, I just cannot understand that. Now, I'm not a Friday the 13th fan myself, but the way this movie takes all of the good elements from all the other Friday the 13th movies, like part one, the ending with Pamela Voorhees, even though there should have been a lot more of that, if we're being honest here, but that's besides the point. You get a little bit of part one, part two, some part three in there, 4, 6, you get all the good parts that we've been seeing throughout these movies, and it combines them all into this one really fun, entertaining film with some really good characters, mind you. The second best cast of characters in this entire franchise, at least in my opinion, because you got someone like Trent, who's an absolute jerk. He's meant to be a jerk. He's a really likable jerk, because you just want to see this dude be an absolute douchebag to everybody around him, and it's just so entertaining watching him act that way. And then even characters with smaller roles, like Wade, who got killed off in like 2 minutes into the movie, or I can't remember the names, Asian and the black guy that are just best friends. They get like a couple lines of screen time, and they're very entertaining and fun to watch. Just characters like that, that are here, there in the movie that are really entertaining. And also, I really root for, the brother trying to find his sister. He's a pretty rootable character. You understand his motivation, and seeing him, succeed at the end, it was pretty, pretty satisfying to see, because, you really root for the guy, you feel bad for him. Overall, I think when it comes down to it, it's just a really good movie. I know some people have complaints about the whole, Jason doesn't capture people, but he captured her because it reminded him of his mother, and he has a close connection with his mother. It makes sense for the character. We've seen things like that with Jason, how he has sort of, not exactly rules or morals, but things that he just won't do. Like, you never see him kill a kid in these movies, because, he was once a kid and stuff like that. And, she reminds him of his mother, or, if you pretend to act like his mother, he'll, think you're his mother, or be easily manipulated that way. There's certain things like that where, this isn't that far-fetched for me. And also, out of any franchise to, complain about rules, this is the one you do it with, because these movies are very inconsistent and, go very out there. There's a movie before this that they were in space, and Jason was frozen in some carbonite or something. This is not the franchise to be complaining about consistency, is what I'm trying to say here. It's just, I just don't understand. It's a really good movie. The acting is actually pretty good from everyone involved. This is maybe some of the best acting in the entire franchise, which I'm not saying it's amazing acting, but yeah, it's pretty good. Overall, it's just a really good movie that I feel like people kind of overlook, and I'm not saying it's a masterpiece, but it's a good Friday the 13th movie. Now, this one, especially when you compare it to the other movies, is by far the best in this franchise, and it's just not that close. First off, it's by far the best role made. The cinematography is actually really good. It feels like there's a lot of effort with the filmmaking and some of the POV shots, and just making the movie look well done instead of half-assed and cheaply made. The writing and acting from the characters is also surprisingly good here. They have personality traits like in the second one, but they feel even more like normal people this time. They take stereotypes and turn them into fun and to an extent normal everyday people. Like Tommy Jarvis, the stereotypical nerd, seems like a normal kid who's just into making masks, or Jimmy Mortimer, the loser, seems like someone who's kind of pathetic but also a nice person that, you could kind of root for. And his dance is even funnier every time I see it. It's also unexpected when someone of these characters die, because you kind of wanted them to last longer. You actually cared when they died. You didn't want them to die because you actually liked them, unlike in a lot of these movies. It's also just a fun Friday the 13th movie when it comes down to just Jason killing people. And it's actually kind of horrifying, this movie. Instead of just goofy and ridiculous kills like in a lot of these movies, it feels more like a real horror movie. The kills feel more grotesque. You feel a little bit more disturbed when you're watching it. And it makes it just feel like they're trying to make something good, and they did. Overall, this movie is really great and one of my favorite horror movies ever. Now it's